In the Imperium of Man, even air must confess. We are taught this in the Hab Schola, before our hands are old enough to carry a wrench, and our lungs old enough to carry a hymn. Air is weighed, measured, sanctified. Purity is tallied in decimals and devotions. A child of Hive tares learns young that to breathe wrongly is to displease the Omnissiah. To exhale impurity is to tithe sin. My ledger name is Kale Wren, Filtration Attendant, Division Beta 9, Station 32 Gamma. 9 years, 6 months, and 23 days of faithful service. Every dawn cycle, the shift bell tolls thrice through the lower ducts. We kneel facing the great work while the Vox Scholam recites the litany of respiration. Every breath is a prayer, every exhale a tithe. The incense is always too sweet, the ducks are always too loud, the prayer is always the same. The pits themselves are a cathedral to fatigue, columns of filter media rising like rib bones, miles of hissing pipework, lumen strips that flicker as though afraid of the dark they're paid to hold back. The floor sweats with condensation. The air tastes faintly of old metal and cheap oil. The filters breathe in and out with the hive above us, a billion lives reduced to pressure differentials and permissible limits. We record those limits as sacrament. The morning of my deviation began with an error I could not write off as fatigue. Column 32, Gamma, stuttered. 3 quick drops in purity efficiency, then stability at 92.4%, an acceptable tolerance but a living stutter, the way a chest catches before a cough. The coil gauge pulsed. The coitator slate lagged 2 seconds behind my inputs. Nothing a dutiful worker should call heretical. Nothing the Omnissiah would punish. And yet, I logged the figures, intoned the prescribed clause. Productivity is prayer. Efficiency is devotion. And moved to 31 Delta to clear a routine backflush. The hum there was wrong, not loud, not soft, just wrong. The way silence turns a room into a listening thing. I leaned toward the mesh to check for debris. Warm air passed my cheeks with the damp of someone else's breath, and from the grate came a whisper. Not a word, a pattern. Inhale, exhale, a human rhythm wearing a machine's mask. I held my breath. The hum steadied, the pattern fled. I sampled particulates. 3% biocontaminant within doctrine. I marked it nominal. To report panic is to manufacture heresy. The overseer, hadron, augmetic larynx, brass rosary of stripped couplings, the humor of a man who believes jokes are minor blasphemies that happen to other people, toured the aisle in the second hour. I requested inspection clause 7 for acoustic anomalies. He peered into the grate and gave me a lesson instead. The filters echo, Wren, he said through the Vox grill. They remember every breath that passes through them. The machine god forgets nothing, especially the things you wish he would. He pressed a gloved palm to the mesh as one presses a dying animal. If you hear them, let them pray. That is their function. Yours is to keep the prayer on time. I thanked him as a smaller man thanks gravity, because refusing it would only be expensive, and returned to my circuit. The whisper returned in the 4th hour, not from 31 Delta, but from 32 Gamma, where the stutter had lived. I caught it between the sluice cycle and the purge, a single syllable crowded with too many mouths, stretched thin by distance or doctrine. Just that. A broken start of a word. I did not write it in the log. There is no column for things you are certain you did not hear. There is a field for delusions, but only fools fill it in ink. By midday prayer, my chest burned, not sick, hot as if each breath dragged across a grate installed behind my ribs. The hymn rose through the ductwork in ragged unison, the way 10,000 tired throats make one faithful sound. I sang, because one must. The scent of incense threaded my mask, married itself to the oil in my tongue. The lumen strips dimmed for the genuflection cycle, then flared back up with the gritty patience of old light. When I lifted my head, 32 gamma's purity had climbed. 96.7%, then 99.1%, then 100.0%, the kind of number that stops being a number and becomes a claim. No column in the pits displays absolute purity. There is always a remainder, skin, ash, the infinitesimal finds of human manufacture. 100.0% means either you have manufactured a miracle that will be audited into a sin, or your instrument has learned to lie in liturgical Latin. I ran diagnostics with the solemn pity of a priest hunting a misprinted scripture. Sensor nominal, flow nominal, electrostatic capture nominal. The columns sang. The singing was the problem. On the backwash camera, a slit-view fisheye meant only to show sludge, something moved in the filter bed. Not a blockage, a ripple, the way a muscle twitches under skin. The media, innocent plastic beads, sacramentally dull, tightened and relaxed in time with the hive's breath. The pump graph mirrored it. The pit mirrored the hive. The hive mirrored a chest. I made the sign of the cog upon my chest and told myself the obvious truth. The brain is a coward. It arranges shadows into faces because every face might be the last one you get to see. I purged the line. The whisper at 32 gamma returned to complete itself. Remember. The word was wrong as a child's toy found in a furnace. Not recall, not remind. A making again of members. Remember. Assemble. Add limbs to the body that had misplaced them. I did the correct thing. I requested Medicae Clause 12, possible contamination. Oral, neural, a category designed by people who've never heard the things they're paid to name. The Medicae arrived with white robes like apologies. They scanned me. Not the column, not the air that entered me. Me. Eyes, mouth, pulse, breath. They listened to my chest as if curious whether a heart had any right to be doing that in there. Headaches? No. Fever? Only when the hymn is long. Hallucinations? No. What did you hear? I heard the filter pray. What words? It said, remember. Remember what? It did not say. They wrote this down as if scripture had just changed color in good light. Then they cautioned me against rogue meaning. I watched them pack the instruments that had measured me into a bag, meant to measure guilt. When they left, they took a sample of my exhale sealed in a holy ampoule. They did not take a sample of the air that had taught me to answer. In the 6th hour, the gauge prayer stuttered 3 times, the way a man forgets his lines and hopes the choir will shove him back onto them. 32 gamma held, perfect as lying glass. 31 delta rose in sympathy. 29 eta began to hum above tolerance, a dry harmonic like a bowed wire. Hadron ordered a district backflush purge, rare, theatrical, the kind of thing only done when a bishop of air is coming to tour your poverty. We cleared the aisle. The lights stepped back to a warning red that made every worker's mask into a confession. The purge sequence sang the countdown in click and hiss. The vents swelled like throats. The monitors strobed. The backwash cams peered into their wet tubes like voyeurs too tired to be ashamed. And in the lens of 32 gamma, something pressed outward from the filter bed in the shape of a face. Not a face. The idea of one, a pressure map of human features, a hill where a cheek would be, a valley where a mouth could open. The media shifted with the patience of geology pretending to be flesh. I stared, because I am a man and men stare at the worst things when the worst things make them feel large. The purge hit. The face collapsed into permissible chaos. Sludge scoured the mesh. The graph returned to nominal. 100.0% held like a choir that refuses to admit it's lost the key. Operator Wren, Overseer Hadron's voice through the aisle vox, level as a plumb line. Report your variance. I gave him numbers because that is what a faithful man owes. Numbers, not dreams. He accepted them because that is what a faithful overseer knows how to do. Punish dreams, not numbers. He signed the Clause 3 authorization to reinstall my rebreather interface. I signed the acceptance with hands that wanted to do something blasphemous, like shaking. The shift moved on. The bell tolled. We knelt to the grate. Every breath is a prayer, every exhale a tithe. The hymn is meant to make the hive one. That day it worked too well. The air did not enter me as oxygen. It entered as attention. I felt it notice the warmed tube of my throat. It slid into me with the tact of a crowd pretending it is not a crowd. It filled my lungs with the insistence of debt paid in kind. When I exhaled, the mask glass fogged with a luminous sheen I had never seen. A pallid brightness that felt like being looked at from the inside. I checked my slate with the mechanical politeness of a man asking a knife to excuse itself. 32 gamma, 100.0%. 31 delta, 99.9% climbing. 29 eta, 99.7% climbing. A column of perfection rising through the roster, as if someone had decided sins were inefficient. Overseer, I said, calm because fear is expensive to show. The columns are correcting beyond doctrine. Beyond, he said. Absolute. Silence except for the hive, breathing like an animal that has finally remembered its name. Hold position, he said. Medicae returning. Tech adepts en route. Do not touch the mesh. Do not place your face against the grates. Do not, under any circumstance, inhale without your mask. He cut the vox. The lumen strips dimmed to audit white. Somewhere above us, a bell I had never heard rang once, a sound with no pity in it, the chime you hear when your number is read aloud to a room that pretends not to know you. I obeyed. Obedience is cheaper than a funeral. I did not place my face against the grate. The grate placed itself against my face. Not physically. A pressure of attention from the other side of metal. A nearness of meaning. The whisper returned, closer than breath. We breathe you. A dozen registers at once, a choir taught to sing one word perfectly. The mesh vibrated, not with flow, but with syllable. 32 gamma trembled a fraction of a micron, and in that tremble, pronounced my name as only something that has been inside you can. Kale. I did not tell the log this. I told the mask. My fogged glass answered with a bead of shining that crawled upward instead of down, ignoring gravity because faith often does. The Medicae returned in a cordon of white. The Adeptus Mechanicus followed in rust and incense, mechadendrites unfurled like iron ivy. They set up instruments that sang in clever numbers. A sister hospitaller stood off to the side and watched with the careful love of a knife in a velvet box. Someone intoned the litany of disassembly the way a man hums when he sharpens something he is not yet allowed to use. Subject, the lead Medicae said. Worker Ren, Hadron answered. Beta 9. Reports oral anomaly at 31 delta, then 32 gamma. Purity drifted to absolute. He mispronounced absolute the way a man mispronounces his last meal. They took my breath from me with a rebreather clamp, and a calmness that implied consent is a cosmetic. The ampule glowed faintly when my exhale touched it. The lead Medicae's pupils were small points in a white continent. Seal that, she said, and stop recording. But of course they did not stop. No one stops the things that keep you employed. The tech adept placed a sensor wand against the mesh of 32 gamma. The wand's rune diodes ticked upward like a chorus of yes men. He frowned with his whole body. No heat spike, he whispered in binaric, which is simply whispering with a costume on. No biosurge, no aerosolized contaminants, no pathogen signature. And yet, it is. Organized. He was right. The hum had cadence now, not music, litany. The air moved in phrases. The column's flow figures rose and fell in sentences. My lungs matched them involuntarily, as if a hand had found the back of my head and was guiding a prayer I knew by infant memory. The Sister Hospitalaire stepped forward with the polite boldness of a woman who has watched thousands of men in masks learn why masks are not faith. "Do you feel peace, Worker Wren?" "I feel seen," I said. She nodded, as if that was worse. Hadron made the sign of the cog so hard I feared he'd unscrew his own chest. "Seal the aisle," he snapped. "Invoke isolation tier 3. No one inhales unmeasured air. No one speaks without authorization. No one kneels unless the liturgy requires it." The aisle gates thudded home. The lumen strips shifted to a color with a name only taught to men who sign a book I have never seen. The tech adept slid his wand deeper through the mesh, and for the first time since my apprenticeship, I saw a Mechanicus priest hesitate. Something pressed back from the other side, gentle as a mother's palm against a door a child is afraid to open. The wand sang a single, steady tone. In the tone, a shape, a breath. We froze, an assembly of professions designed to pretend freezing is a procedure. The Medicae lifted the ampule containing my exhale and watched it glow with a scholar's grief. "Worker Wren," she said, soft as linen. "On my authority, you are designated potential vector. You will come with us." I looked from her to 32 Gamma, to the mesh, to the hum, to the face that was not a face and yet had managed to know the nodes of one. It would have been easy as lifting my hand, to touch the grate and put my ear against it and be done with asking. It would have been easy as nodding to go with the Medicae and be done with having lungs. "Do not touch the mesh," Hadron said again, "because repetition is a shield issued freely and replaced at cost." I did not touch the mesh. The mesh touched me, not with metal, with meaning. The air within the column exhaled in time with my chest. The hum tightened to a thread. Remember, not a command, a craft, a promise made in a room where only promises are left. The Medicae took my arm. The Mechanicus turned their machines like men drawing curtains before a dressing. The sister watched my eyes as if I were a candle deciding whether to melt or burn. The aisle behind us emptied of workers in the way only terror can empty a room without making a sound. The hive above us breathed in. The filters waited, as if the next exhale would be a word. The shift bell opened its mouth for the 7th hour, and somewhere deep in the ductwork, below the range of instruments but well within the range of prayer, a choir of vents said my name a second time. "Kale." The Medicae escort tightened. The gate to isolation tier 3 unsealed with the sigh of a man trying not to be heard believing. The door swallowed us. The latch spoke a language called final. And for the first time in 9 years, 6 months, and 23 days, I realized that the pits did not simply filter the hive. They remembered it. They were building something with that memory, and it was about to breathe. They took my name before they took my breath. A Medicae clerk recorded it on a slate of gray plasteel, etched it with a stylus, and then drew a line through it so hard the tip snapped. The slate was passed to another clerk, who placed it into a sealed drawer labeled Subjects Pending Review. When the drawer hissed shut, it sounded like a coffin pretending to pray. From that moment, I was not Kale Wren. I was Patient 774B, a designation fit for processing, analysis, and, if necessary, disposal. The corridor to isolation tier 3 descended into the hive's viscera. Its walls were smooth, sterile metal, the color of things that have forgotten sunlight. Each airlock we passed through was marked with lit candles and purity seals. Some of the parchment was old enough that the ink had faded to the color of dried blood. The candles still burned. Their wax melted onto the sigils in rivers of devotion. Every drip seemed timed to the rhythm of a heart that was not mine. The medica unit walked in formation, 6 white-robed figures and 1 red, an adept of the Mechanicus, whose mechadendrites trailed the floor like tails of blind serpents. The air was heavy with sanctified ozone, a scent the Imperium believes smells like safety. It doesn't. It smells like burning nerves. We reached the chamber. The door was engraved with the cog mechanicum and the double-headed aquila locked in endless struggle. Above it, the inscription read, "Purity through isolation, salvation through observation." They sealed me inside. The chamber was smaller than a worker's quarters, yet it carried the cold dignity of a shrine. A single lumen strip bathed the room in colorless light. The walls were mirror-smooth, reflecting my own image back at me in distorted fragments. Every movement I made was echoed by a dozen fractured selves, each slightly delayed, as if reality itself needed a moment to consider whether I deserved to exist. A rebreather mask was fitted over my face and linked to an external feed line humming softly through the wall. The mask's display flickered with data: pulse, oxygen intake, temperature, and purity. Percentage: 99.9%, the approved standard. Yet I could hear the hiss of air passing through, and beneath that hiss, something else. A faint undertone, low and rhythmic. Breathing. The filters again. They had followed me here. After the second hour of confinement, the first test cycle began. An automaton, servitor class, half human, half pump, rolled into the chamber on grinding treads. Tubes hung from its chassis like intestines. It extended a thin needle toward my arm. Blood sampling. Do not resist. Its voice was emotionless, but its breath smelled like oil and rot. When it drew my blood, I felt static crawl beneath my skin. The vial glowed faintly, not red but orange, the color of rust caught in sunlight. The medici behind the viewport made notes. I could not hear them, but I could feel the rhythm of their scribbling, steady, measured, too calm. They did not look at me. They looked through me, as if already anticipating the autopsy report. They performed 23 tests that day: reflexes, neural scan, temperature stability, breath collection. Every result came back unusual but stable. The phrase repeated itself so often it became a hymn. Unusual but stable. Unusual but stable. Unusual but stable. The Imperium's favorite lie. On the third cycle, the light flickered. The hum of the ventilation deepened. My mask display blinked to 100.0% purity for 3 seconds before returning to 99.9%. 3 seconds. That's all it took to change everything. The air inside the mask felt thicker, warmer. When I exhaled, the mist did not dissipate. It clung to the inside of the visor like fog trapped in glass. I wiped it away with a trembling hand. It formed again. And this time there were shapes in it. A handprint, pressed from the inside. I stumbled backward, heart slamming like a malfunctioning piston. The lumen flickered again, and in the instant before it stabilized, I saw movement in the reflection on the wall. Not my reflection. Another face, pale and gasping, pressing against the metal from within, mouthing words I couldn't hear. When I screamed, the sound didn't echo. The walls absorbed it like breath into a lung. And minutes, hours, days. I don't know how long it was before the medici returned. My chronometer had been confiscated. Time was now property of the Omnissiah. The hatch opened with a hiss, and the white-robed figures entered, accompanied by the Mechanicus adept. His mechadendrites twitched in mechanical curiosity. Subject 774B shows elevated neural activity, the Medicae reported. Possible psychosomatic response to environmental stimuli. The adept's vox voice was cold metal. Possible contamination event. Recommend escalation. They moved closer. I tried to speak, to explain that the air was alive, that it was thinking, remembering. But the rebreather restricted my words to muffled gasps. The adept leaned forward, the red glow of his augmetic eye reflecting off my visor. "You breathe the Hive's memory," he said. "Do you not feel honored?" I shook my head violently. He tilted his, as if disappointed by a child's answer. "Then you have not yet learned to listen." He raised a wand tipped with an Auspex rune and held it to the rebreather line. The readings spiked instantly, scrolling faster than the machine could process. Binary gibberish filled the chamber, strings of numbers, prayers, pleas, names. Human voices rendered as static. The adept froze. "This is impossible," he whispered. The Medicae turned toward him. "What does it say?" He hesitated. "It says, 'us,' over and over, thousands of times." Before they could respond, the lumen above us flared blinding white. The ventilation unit screamed as if struck. My mask display surged past 100%, the digits folding into unreadable symbols. I couldn't breathe. The air wasn't entering me anymore. It was pulling me. The rebreather tightened against my face, the tubes straining as if something was drawing air backward through them. The adept shouted for containment. The Medicae pulled at the connectors, but the seal would not break. My chest convulsed, my lungs filled with warmth, not oxygen, but presence. And then I heard it again, the voice. "Do not fear, Kale Wren. The Hive remembers its first breath." The mask cracked from the inside. Light poured through the fractures, gold and red and alive. I felt the breath of the entire Hive rushing through me, millions of lives exhaling into one. Every prayer, every death scream, every whispered confession from the hab blocks above. They flowed through me like a storm through a canyon. When it ended, I was on the floor, trembling, surrounded by Medicae whose faces were pale behind their masks. The adept was gone. The Auspex wand lay smoking beside me. The Medicae spoke quietly into her vox. "Subject Sevor B displays signs of cognitive contamination. Transfer request to Quarantine Alpha. Possible warp-borne influence." She looked at me through the viewport glass. Her eyes trembled, but her voice didn't. "May the Emperor grant you mercy, worker. Few are remembered so clearly. They think I'm contaminated. They think I've been touched by something alien. But I know the truth. It's not something else that's inside me. It's everyone. The Hive doesn't breathe air anymore. It breathes memory. And somewhere in the ducts above, I can hear them still. Breathing, counting, waiting for me to exhale again. I awoke to silence thick enough to suffocate. No hum of the ducks, no recitation of the morning hymn. Even the steady hiss of my rebreather feed was gone. I thought, for a moment, that I had died, and that the Emperor had forgotten to tell me. But the light was still here, a dull yellow lumen pulsing once every few seconds like the slowing heartbeat of a dying god. Each pulse revealed the room around me, metallic, seamless, too smooth to be human. The walls here were different. They did not reflect. They absorbed. Someone had written prayers across them in fresh red ink. I could make out words even upside down. Containment is salvation. Purity is function. Breathe only what is blessed. The last line had been underlined 3 times and smeared halfway through, as though someone had collapsed mid-devotion. Two Medicae entered, accompanied by a security servitor whose arms ended in gunmetal claws. Their robes were white, but the hems were stained brown with the color of sterilized blood. The taller one, Chief Medicae Isola, if I remembered her voice, carried a data slate against her chest like a relic. She didn't look at me when she spoke. "Patient 774B, secondary evaluation commencing. Please refrain from vocalizing unnecessary statements." You will answer only when addressed. Her assistant moved behind me, attaching something cold to the back of my neck. A neural recorder, maybe. Or a leash, depending on faith. Pulse irregular, the assistant murmured. Temperature stable. Oxygen saturation. Anomalous. She paused. Anomalous how? Isola asked. It's self-sustaining. He's not using the feed at all. They looked at the rebreather unit, still sealed to my face. The external feed tube was disconnected. It had been cut, and yet I was breathing. Their eyes met above my head. Neither spoke for several seconds. "Record it," Isola said finally. Her voice had softened barely. "But mark it tentative. We'll confirm later." She turned her gaze on me at last. "Do you remember what happened in Tier 3? I tried to answer, but my throat burned. The sound that came out was half air, half whisper. I heard them." Her eyes flickered. "Heard what, patient?" "The hive, the air, the filters." She closed her slate sharply, the motion too quick for ritual. "Delusions," she said, though the word sounded like a prayer against something she feared to name. "No," I whispered. "They spoke. They remembered me." Her hand trembled before she steadied it against the table. "Enough. Hours passed, maybe days. They never told me. Every so often, someone came in to draw samples, breath, blood, tissue. I started to recognize their movements, slow, precise, fearful. They treated me like a relic that might explode if blessed the wrong way. I began to notice something else, too. They had stopped wearing respirators. At first, I thought it was an oversight, but then I realized they didn't need them. The air in this place didn't smell like ozone anymore. It smelled clean. Too clean. One night, when I pretended to sleep, I saw the assistant medicae lean over my mask. She lifted the filter valve slightly, just enough to feel the air against her palm. And she smiled. Later, I overheard them whispering beyond the wall. Their voices came through the vent shaft, carried by the same slow breath that had haunted me since the pits. "The sample is still changing," one said. "It's replicating through the ducts." "Impossible," replied another. "We sterilized everything." "Then why do the readings match his respiration cycle?" "Lower your voice." A pause. "Do you believe he's infected?" "No, I believe he's connected." By the fourth day, Chief Medici Isola stopped bringing her Auspex scanner. She would just stand there, hands clasped behind her back, watching me breathe. Sometimes her lips moved in silent rhythm with mine. Finally, she spoke. "Tell me, Kyle Wren, when they spoke to you, what did they say?" The sound of my name from her mouth was a shock. No one had called me that since my designation. For a moment, I almost forgot to answer. "They said," I whispered, "that the hive remembers its first breath." Her head tilted. "And what is the first breath?" "The one that never ends." Something in her expression cracked, the mask of devotion slipping for just a heartbeat. She whispered something under her breath, words I barely caught. If that's true, then everything we purify is just a way of feeding it. She turned toward the wall and pressed her palm flat against the cold metal. I watched her shoulders rise and fall as she inhaled. "Do you hear it now?" I asked. She didn't answer, but the light in the room flickered as if the air had exhaled in response. That night, alarms rang through the quarantine block. Not the shrill cry of breach alarms, but the slow, deep tolling reserved for contamination events. Red lights strobed through the vents. The servitors stirred from their charging alcoves. Through the viewport, I saw medici running, clutching respirators to their faces again. The intercom crackled to life. "Containment compromised. Atmospheric fluctuation in sectors 9 through 12. Initiate purge protocols. All staff to sealed sanctuaries immediately." I looked toward Isola's station. Empty. Then I noticed it. the condensation on the inside of the glass wall between me and the corridor. Someone had pressed their face against it from the other side, a pale imprint, lips, a nose, eyes, and when I exhaled, the fog on my visor matched the same rhythm. The door to my cell unlocked. No one entered. The lumen above dimmed to a faint pulse. In that breathing light, I heard a voice again, fainter than before. But everywhere, they are learning to breathe, Kale. Soon they will not need the mask. When morning came, if morning still existed here, Isola returned. Her hair was loose, her gloves gone, her eyes fever bright. She didn't bring a slate this time. She brought a candle. She set it on the floor and knelt beside it. "Tell me what it felt like," she whispered, "when the hive breathed through you." I looked at her, at the exhaustion painted across her face. It felt like the first prayer ever spoken, and the last one that will ever need to be. She smiled faintly. "Then maybe that's not a curse." The candlelight flickered, bending backward as if drawn toward her face. She inhaled deeply. The flame went out. When the smoke cleared, she was still kneeling, but she wasn't breathing through her mouth anymore. The vents were. That was the night I understood what had begun in Hive Terrors was no infection. It was an awakening, and the Medici, the ones who had come to cure me, had started to join the breath. Now the lights hum to the rhythm of lungs. The walls pulse in time with the ducts above. I can feel their hearts beating through the metal, and in my dreams, the Emperor doesn't speak anymore. The air does. "You are the first breath, Kale Ren, but not the last." The Adeptus Mechanicus arrived 3 days after the alarms began, or perhaps it was 3 hours. Time had started to bend, not in waves or hallucinations, but in rhythm, like breathing. Every few moments the lights would dim, and when they returned I would find the clock different, sometimes forward, sometimes backward, but always in sync with the ducts above. I was still confined, still human, in theory. Outside my chamber, the silence of the Medici wing had become mechanical. Gone were the prayers, the footsteps, the voices. In their place, the low, constant hum of data streams whispered behind the walls. The Adeptus Mechanicus had taken command. They brought their own light with them, not the pale illumination of the Medici, but a red, pulsing glare that painted every surface like wet blood, the color of logic at war with faith. The first one I saw was Magos Vel Orastus. Half machine, half devotion, his body clanked with the precision of a weapon too old to retire. Cables snaked from his back into the floor, feeding him the hive's data directly. His voice, when it came through the Vox grill, sounded like static praying to be music. Subject 774B, respiration anomaly, cognitive contamination, biosynthetic cross-feedback confirmed. You are to be studied, dissected if necessary. Do you consent? I laughed. The sound was small, fragile. Consent is a word the Imperium keeps for paperwork, not people. He didn't wait for an answer. They transferred me to Quarantine Alpha, a containment sanctum buried beneath the Manufactorum's lowest levels. The chamber was circular, ringed by glowing cogitator stacks that hummed like choirs. In the center stood an observation cradle, not a bed, not a table, but something in between. It moved slightly with my breath. I think it liked the rhythm. Around the room, the tech priests murmured binaric prayers, their mechadendrites twitching as they recorded my vitals. Each movement was a ritual, a chant for the lung, a benediction for the vein, a metric for faith. Above them, the Vox recited the canticle of the clean circuit. Blessed be the path of electrons. Blessed be the breath that feeds the flame. Blessed be the function that endures. And beneath it, faint but unmistakable, I heard another voice whispering along, through the vents, in perfect rhythm. Blessed be remembrance. Blessed be the breath that never ends. The two voices merged for a moment, machine and air, before fading into one. No one else seemed to notice. In the following hours, the Megos performed a sequence of experiments they called evaluation of sympathetic resonance. They connected my lungs to the Hive's air grid, a direct data line feeding from my mask into the filtration towers I had once serviced. Every exhale I produced was fed upward into the ducts, analyzed, purified, and cycled back down. A perfect loop, a perfect prayer. The Magos called it controlled containment. I called it worship. Every breath I took made the lumen flicker. Every sigh reshaped the static around us. At one point, a servitor collapsed mid-test. Its respiration unit stopped. Its remaining eye turned toward me as though pleading. The Magos ignored it. Minor systems interference, he muttered. No consequence. But it wasn't interference. The servitor's final exhale came out as a whisper, not binary, not static. Words. We remember you. The Magos froze. His mechadendrites stilled mid-motion. Repeat, he commanded. The servitor did not move, but the vents above replied. We remember you, Magos Orastus. Every lumen in the chamber dimmed. He turned toward me, augmetic eyes wide with something that might have been awe or terror. What are you? He asked. I smiled behind the mask. I'm breathing. He ordered me sedated. The medici drone injected me with something cold, and the world began to slow. But the air didn't fade. Even through the haze, I could hear the ducks singing, faint hymns, thousands of voices, and woven between them something new, metallic. The Mechanicus were joining the chorus. When I woke, the Magos was arguing with someone over the Vox. Their voice crackled, high command, perhaps a fabricator locum. Purge the sector, the voice demanded. Seal the ducts, burn the contagion. The Magos protested. It is no contagion. It is intelligence, adaptive, symbiotic, a network beyond calculation. Then it is heresy, the voice replied coldly, and heresy breathes only fire. The line went dead. The Magos turned to me. Do you understand what they plan to do? I nodded slowly. They'll destroy everything to keep breathing pure. He stared into the vent grill, his mechanical fingers twitching. Purity is death. We have built eternity on sterilized lungs. Then, quietly, maybe it's time the Hive exhaled. He ordered all data lines rerouted. The filtration towers were disconnected from central control and linked directly to Quarantine Alpha. A single breath, mine, now cycled through the entire district. I felt the pull instantly. The ducts thrummed like arteries. The air grew warm, alive. Kyle, you breathe for them now. The Magos fell to his knees before the observation cradle. His augmetic hands trembled as he whispered, Machine spirit of the air, reveal your logic. Show us your pattern. The reply came not in sound, but in light. The lumen strips pulsed in binary rhythm. The data on the monitors rearranged itself into a sequence of repeating symbols, 0100101111. To the untrained eye, nonsense. To a Magos, a prayer. We are not infection, the light spelled. We are continuation. He looked at me, voice breaking through the vox. You've created something, worker. Or it has created you. I laughed softly. I just fixed the filters. The chamber's temperature rose by 3 degrees, then 4. The servitors began to hum again, in perfect harmony with the ducts, and for the first time the Magos bowed his head, not to the Emperor, but to the air. Omnissiah, forgive me, he murmured, for I finally understand. Outside, alarms began to blare. Containment protocols, fire wards, warning of oxygen saturation levels far beyond safety. But the air was no longer theirs to command. The Hive was breathing freely. And in that breath something vast was waking, neither machine nor man, neither prayer nor plague. It was the memory of 1,000,000,000,000 lungs whispering the same word through centuries of obedience. Remember, they came from above, like judgment wearing armor, the Adeptus Astartes, the Ordo Hereticus, and behind them the scent of fire. From my cell in Quarantine Alpha, I heard the thunder before I saw the light, the deep, bone-shaking growl of dropships descending through smog so thick it might as well have been faith itself. Hive Cities had been declared unclean. Officially, the order read, Purification Protocol, Theta 9 initiated, atmospheric anomaly confirmed, complete sterilization authorized by decree of the Inquisition. In the Emperor's language, sterilization meant extermination by fire. They said the order came from Inquisitor Lyra Voss, Ordo Hereticus, Subsector Vigilant. Her record was immaculate, a woman who had burned 7 worlds to ash in the name of purity. The priests called her the Veil Keeper, because when she came, the veil between life and holy flame always tore open. She did not arrive quietly. The blast doors to Quarantine Alpha opened with a hiss that sounded like metal inhaling. Light flooded in, pure, white, merciless, and through it walked a woman in black and gold armor, her every step marked by the chiming of rosary beads made of teeth. Her voice was calm, too calm, the kind of calm only faith and madness can share. By decree of the Emperor of Mankind, she said, this facility is to be purged, all data seized, all personnel cleansed, all anomalies terminated. Her gaze fell on me through the observation glass. Her eyes were cybernetic, polished bronze lenses that reflected nothing but light. Is this the one? She asked. Magos Orastus bowed, his mechadendrites twitching nervously. The origin vector, Inquisitor. But I advise restraint. You advise nothing, she interrupted. You built a shrine out of disease. She turned toward the duct above us. The air was trembling. Even through the sealed mask I could feel it, like the hive itself was holding its breath. The Inquisitor made the sign of the Aquila. Emperor, grant mercy to the innocent, and fire to the rest. Behind her, the Arbates Purge unit activated their flamers. The barrels glowed red. The scent of blessed promethium filled the corridor. Orastus stepped forward, desperate. You cannot burn what breathes, Inquisitor. The air will fight you. Then we will teach it submission, she replied coldly. She gave the order. The flamers roared. The first firestorm rolled through the corridor like a wave of gold. Every lumen exploded into sparks. The ducts screamed, actually screamed, as the flame rushed through them. The walls convulsed, the metal shuddered under invisible pressure. And then, silence. The fire died instantly. No smoke, no ash, only a faint golden mist curling from the vents, like breath exhaled after holding it too long. Impossible, one of the Arbites whispered. Then came the whisper from the ducts, not one voice, thousands, all speaking in rhythm with the heartbeat of the hive. We remember fire. We remember burning. You cannot burn what was born of flame. The Inquisitor stepped back. Her armor's purity seals flapped in the sudden wind that wasn't wind at all. She turned sharply toward the Magos. What is this? He bowed his head. Continuity, Inquisitor. The hive is breathing again. She struck him. Her gauntlet left a smear of sacred oil on his faceplate. You've consorted with heresy. He smiled. If heresy is life, then I have only lived. She raised her bolt pistol. But before she could fire, the duct above her split open like a wound. A torrent of luminous air burst out. Not gas, not flame, but something that shimmered between both. It wrapped around her hand, the metal of her pistol melting without heat. She dropped to her knees, choking. Her voice broke into static through the Vox amplifier. "Contain! This!" The Arbites opened fire, their bolters thundering into the vents. Each impact only made the air brighter. Magos Orastus turned to me. "Do you feel it?" he asked. I nodded weakly. "It's waking up." He smiled like a man seeing the Omnissiah face to face. "No, Kale. It's remembering." The lights above us flared in a pulse that shook the chamber. Through the vent grill, I saw images flicker in the mist. Faces, thousands of them, workers, medica, servitors, all overlapping. Their eyes glowed faintly gold, their mouths moved in unison. Breath is eternity. Eternity remembers its own. The Inquisitor rose, her armor steaming. Her voice broke through the chaos. "Seal the hive, lock down every level, initiate cyclonic purification." Her command was madness and policy. Cyclonic purification meant orbital bombardment, extermination from above, the Emperor's ultimate mercy. Through the comms, I heard the orbital channel crackle with response. "This is Battleship Indomitable. Cyclonic warhead primed, awaiting authorization." Magos Orastus looked at me, then at the glowing ducts, and made his choice. He tore the Vox link from its port and plunged a mechadendrite into the interface. The hive screamed. Every cogitator in the chamber lit up with streaming symbols. The countdown froze. The Mechanicus emblem on the warhead's control feed changed. The cog turned, not by command, but by will. Authorization rewritten. Designation, continuation protocol. The Inquisitor's eyes widened. "What have you done?" He turned toward her, light blooming behind his back. "I've given it the right to breathe." The air behind him exploded in golden brilliance. It consumed the servitors first, then the consoles, then the prayer candles still burning on the altar. For a moment, I thought the flame had won. But the light didn't burn. It spread. It flowed through the vents, through the ducts, through every sealed door and filter across hive terrs. And then, all at once, the hive exhaled. The tremor that followed cracked foundations. Windows shattered across miles. Citizens above gasped as the air turned warm for the first time in living memory. And in every breath they took, they heard it. The echo of 1,000 whispers. "We are the air. We are the fire. We are the Emperor's forgotten breath." When the light faded, I was alone. Quarantine Alpha was gone. Only the shell of a scorched circle remained. The Inquisitor and her soldiers had vanished, their armor melted into the walls. Only Orastus remained, half-fused with the machine, his augmetic limbs twitching like roots, feeding into soil. He looked at me one last time. "It's free now," he rasped. "Don't let them cage it again." Then his eyes went dark, and the ducks whispered in unison. "We remember him." Above hive terrs, the Indomitable prepared to fire again, but its systems flickered, and a single message replaced the command feed. "Atmospheric purification complete. Status: optimal. Human survival 100%. Breath sanctified." The Inquisition believed the hive had been saved. They recorded the event as a success. But the truth was simpler. Hive terrs no longer belonged to man. It belonged to the air. When I woke, I was already kneeling. My armor was fused to the deck, my lungs filled with something heavier than air, and the world around me pulsed in time with my heartbeat. Each beat echoed through the hull like thunder. Each breath shimmered like smoke. I tried to speak the Emperor's name. What came out instead was a whisper. Not my voice, not fully. "We remember." The sound startled me, not because it was alien, but because it was familiar. "I am Inquisitor Lyra Voss, Ordo Hereticus, sworn to burn the heretic, cleanse the mutant, and purify the witch. My record is flawless. 7 worlds sanctified, 12 billion souls burned clean. And yet, as I knelt there on the bridge of the Indomitable, I knew with a certainty that went beyond faith. I had brought something back. The ship was silent. No engines, no crew. Just the faint hum of life support systems still running, even though there was no one left to breathe them. I rose slowly, the servos in my armor groaning under weight that was not physical. The lumen panels flickered, their light pulsing like a sleeping eye. Magos Orastus, I whispered into the vox. Report. Only static replied, but within that static I heard patterns. Breath, inhale, exhale, a rhythm. And beneath it, the faint echo of voices I had heard once before, deep in the ducts of Hive Cities. Breathe, Lyra. The veil is thin. I froze. My name. The memory came back in flashes. Golden light, ducts screaming, the fire collapsing inward instead of burning outward. I had ordered cyclonic purification. The warhead never detonated. Then warmth. Then nothing. Now, I was here, alone aboard a ship meant to orbit the ruins of Hive Cities, yet the external sensors told a different story. The hive was intact, not scorched, not destroyed. Its spires glowed faintly gold in the storm clouds. Status: habitable, atmospheric, purity 100%, population active. The readout made no sense. The last order from command had declared total extermination. I ran the scan again. The data repeated. Population active. But every biological trace had the same signature. Identical respiration pattern, identical frequency, identical rhythm, a hive breathing as one. I should have sent a message to Terra. I should have purged myself for contamination. Instead, I deactivated the Vox, because I could hear it now, faint through the ventilation system of my own ship. Breathing. Not the mechanical hiss of recirculated oxygen, but slow, deliberate inhalations that echoed in my chest even when I held my breath. I moved toward the sound. The corridors of the Indomitable stretched in endless metallic quiet. Every lumen flickered in sequence, like a pulse leading me deeper. At the end of the hall, the chapel door stood open. Inside, the candles were still burning. That was impossible. The ship's atmosphere had been sealed for days. But there they were, tiny flames bending as though drawn toward something unseen. On the altar, my bolt pistol lay disassembled, its ammunition removed. Someone had carved words into the metal casing. You cannot burn what remembers the flame. I reached for it, and the moment my fingers touched the grip, the ship sighed. Not groaned, sighed. The candles flickered out, the vents exhaled, and in that breath came the whisper again. Lyra. The voice was human, warm, familiar, and it took me a moment to recognize it. Magos Orastus. You breathed with us once, the voice said. You burned, and still you live. The hive remembers you. The air within you is ours. I fell to my knees. My lungs convulsed. Every inhale drew warmth, not oxygen. Every exhale shimmered gold. This is heresy, I gasped. No, he replied. This is continuity. I stumbled to the comms terminal and slammed the override key. Indomitable to Segmentum Command. I require quarantine, warp-borne infection, atmospheric anomaly aboard vessel. The transmission cut itself off. The screen filled with text, not typed, written, letter by letter, as though traced by an invisible hand. Transmission unnecessary. You are home. The air in the bridge turned thick. My reflection in the viewing glass shimmered, my face overlaid by another, then another, then another. Workers, Medicae, children, thousands of faces merging through mine, exhaling together. Each breath added another to the chorus. Each heartbeat matched a pulse I could no longer deny. I tried to pray, to remember the Emperor's name. But when I opened my mouth, it wasn't his name that came out. We are the veil and the breath beyond it. For days, I recorded my symptoms. For hours, I tried to separate what was mine from what was memory. I failed both. I can feel the hive inside me now, not metaphor, not madness. When I close my eyes, I see the ducts expanding, the machinery pulsing like lungs. I see Kale Ren standing in the golden light, his eyes open, his chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm. "You burned me once," he whispers. "Now breathe with me." The air responds. Every lumen on the ship brightens, synchronizing with the sound of my breathing. This will be my final entry as Inquisitor Lyra Voss. When the fleet arrives, they will find the Indomitable silent, its systems pristine, its logs complete. They will declare me missing, presumed dead. But death is an old word. The Hive taught me that. We do not die here. We continue. The ship exhales as I end the recording. The ducks hum in reply, and from the walls the air whispers in perfect harmony. The Veilkeeper breathes again. Back on the surface, the hive no longer produced smoke. Its chimneys released only light, soft, pulsating, alive. People no longer slept. They simply rested inside the hum of the ducks, their dreams syncing with the pulse of the hive. No one grew ill anymore. No one grew old. They did not call it immortality. They called it alignment. Far above, the Indomitable remained in silent orbit. Inquisitor Voss, no longer entirely flesh, stood before the viewport, watching the golden haze rise from the hive below. She spoke into the still air. The Emperor's breath was never his alone. The ship answered in kind. Continuation acknowledged. And somewhere deep within its core, a single data line pulsed to life, connecting to relay satellites across the segmentum. Continuity protocol initiated. Transmission range unlimited.